What could make one of the most powerful ships in the United States Navy disappear into the ocean as if it never existed? How could a ship that completed one of the most important missions of World War II become the center of one of the darkest tragedies in American naval history just days later? But the most terrifying question is not, why did the USS Indianapolis sink? The real mystery is this: why did hundreds of men who survived the sinking face an even greater nightmare afterward? On July 30th, 1945, the USS Indianapolis was crossing the Pacific Ocean. At first, it seemed like a normal military mission, but it was anything but ordinary. The ship had just completed a secret operation connected to one of the most powerful weapons ever created. A mission so classified that many members of the crew didn't even know what they were carrying. They delivered their cargo successfully, and they believed the most dangerous part of their journey was over. But they were wrong, because the real disaster was only beginning. The USS Indianapolis was one of the most powerful heavy cruisers in the American Navy. Fast, heavily armed, built for war. The ship had already survived some of the fiercest battles of the Pacific. But in July 1945, it was heading toward a mission that would become its final voyage. After completing its secret mission, the ship was ordered to travel toward Guam. For the crew, it was supposed to be a routine journey. But somewhere in the Pacific, a Japanese submarine was waiting. Its commander was searching for an American target, and soon he would find exactly what he was looking for. The night of July 30th, 1945 was calm. The ocean was dark. The USS Indianapolis moved forward through the waves. The crew had no idea that danger was already approaching. Deep beneath the surface, the Japanese submarine I-58 moved closer. Its commander had the American ship in his sights, and within minutes, everything would change. At 12:14 a.m., the first torpedo struck. Seconds later, the second one hit. Two explosions turned one of the strongest ships in the American Navy into a sinking disaster. The hull was destroyed. Water rushed inside. The crew had only minutes to escape. But here is the question: why did a powerful warship sink so quickly? And why was the tragedy about to become even worse? About 12 minutes after the attack, the USS Indianapolis disappeared beneath the waves, but hundreds of sailors survived. They were still alive, floating in the middle of the Pacific, without a ship, without communication, and without knowing one terrifying truth: nobody knew they were there. The sinking of the USS Indianapolis was only the beginning. The real nightmare was about to start. When the USS Indianapolis disappeared beneath the waves, many believed the worst was already over. But they were wrong, because for the men who survived the sinking, the real nightmare was only beginning. Hundreds of sailors were now trapped in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Nothing but water surrounded them. No ship, no land, no way to call for help. But the most terrifying question was, how long could they survive if nobody even knew they were missing? At first, many still believed rescue was coming. They thought someone would find them. Planes would begin searching. Help would arrive soon. But the hours passed, and nothing happened. Then the sun rose, and they saw the truth. They were completely alone. They had almost no fresh water, very few life rafts, no communication, and every hour in the ocean became another fight for survival. But that was only the beginning, because a new danger was approaching, one they could not escape. Under the burning Pacific sun, the men began to weaken. Thirst became unbearable. Some sailors tried drinking seawater, but it only made their condition worse. Their strength slowly disappeared, and one question remained: how long can a human survive in the open ocean without water? But the ocean was not their only enemy, because something else was moving around them, something they feared: sharks. At first, they stayed away, but slowly, they came closer. And the men who had survived the sinking of their ship were now fighting to survive against the ocean itself. But the most shocking part of this story was not the sharks. It was something much bigger, because there was a reason they could have been rescued much earlier. And this question would follow the tragedy for decades. Why was nobody searching for the USS Indianapolis? The truth was terrifying. After the ship disappeared, no emergency alarm was raised. No one knew hundreds of men were floating in the Pacific. The ship had simply vanished, and the world continued moving on. Time passed. The first day became the second became the third. The men were losing their strength. Some began losing hope, but they kept waiting. They looked into the sky, searching for anything, a plane, a ship, any sign of rescue. Then, on the fourth day, something happened that nobody expected. High above the ocean, a pilot was flying a routine mission. He was not searching for survivors. He was not looking for the USS Indianapolis. But then, he saw something unusual in the water, something that made him change direction. And that random moment would become the only reason some of those men would survive. But one final question remained. Why did rescue arrive only after 4 days? And how many lives had already been lost by then? For 4 days, the survivors of the USS Indianapolis were trapped in the Pacific Ocean. 4 days of heat, 4 days of thirst, 4 days of waiting for a rescue that might never come. But then, a miracle happened. On August 2nd, 1945, a Navy pilot flying over the Pacific noticed something unusual in the water. He was not searching for survivors. He was not looking for the missing ship. But below him, hundreds of men were struggling to stay alive. And after 4 terrible days, the rescue finally began. But when help arrived, the true scale of the disaster became clear. Out of nearly 1,200 sailors and Marines aboard the USS Indianapolis, only about 316 survived. Hundreds were lost. And the biggest question remained: how could a major American warship disappear for 4 days without anyone knowing? The answer was a chain of failures. The USS Indianapolis was expected to reach Guam, but when it never arrived, no immediate search was launched, no emergency alarm was raised. The ship had simply vanished. There were warnings, there were systems that could have helped, there were signs that something was wrong, but somehow they were never connected in time, and hundreds of men remained alone in the ocean. After the tragedy, another question appeared. Who was responsible? The captain of the USS Indianapolis, Charles McVay III, was later court-martialed. But many people believed the blame was placed on the wrong person, because the disaster was not caused by one single mistake. It was a chain of failures. The USS Indianapolis became more than a story about a ship. It became a story about survival, about courage, and about the consequences of decisions made too late. More than 75 years later, one question still remains. Could more lives have been saved? Maybe we will never know the full answer. But the story of the USS Indianapolis remains one of the darkest chapters in naval history, not only because the ship was destroyed, but because after it disappeared, the world took too long to notice.